do like your acid rock. Well, that's SonicLAB here, and we're very pleased to have Gaz, who is the legendary Berlin drum machine thief, but we've got the Behringer RD-8.
RD-8.
RD-8, the name has changed, we think. But basically, this is it. I mean, this was the biggest video for us from Super Booth of last year, and people, you're gagging for this.
Yeah.
Essentially, what we have here is a kind of analogue, yes it is analogue.
Properly analogue.
Drum machine modelled very much on the classic TR-808 with individual outputs, with all the kind of good stuff, plus a load of extra things besides, right?
Yeah, and I would go as far to say that rather than this being like a reissue or a recreation of the original, I would say this is almost like a Mark II, such as the additional stuff.
And it looks very familiar. I mean, we've got the same font, but they've changed a few things up.
These colours are like the other way round, and these, you know,
the knob. Yeah, in fact, there's the boutique over there.
Yeah,
which is the Roland.
I'd like to talk about the difference between these because they're roughly the same price.
Right.
So you'd think, why on earth would you want to buy the Roland one, when you can get a big analog one like this? And
well, there is a big difference actually, and one of the big differences. I mean, the 808 very much classic drum machine, but as with most drum machines, the reason it's classic is what happens to it sort of post. You know, the main output is going to be, oh, that doesn't sound like the record. Right. Whereas with the Roland TR-8, you've got the USB capability. Yeah. You can bring everything
all the channels as individual channels over USB,
and then process them and get that classic sound with channel processing for each one, right?
Whereas with this one, we can do it, but we have to.
You're going to have to plug it into a good old either a mixing desk or some kind of computer interface and do it that way.
Yeah, and I think as well, I think they both can coexist, because if you want like the historically correct recreation, well, I say historically correct, the boutique one mimics like the entire workflow and the way that you program it, and you know, and it does it in a way that's quite clunky by modern standards, whereas the RD-8
is a bit more modern.
It takes a more modern approach.
Let's stop talking about it and let's take a start, because I mean, I guess what we should do is probably go through some of the voices.
Yeah.
I mean, before we do that, we should also say what we have here is not final. I think it's close to final.
Yes.
And normally we don't do that sort of thing because, you know, things often change. But because this is such a big sort of item, we figured, well, what could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong?
So, pretty damn close.
Pretty damn close. So, I mean, people will be going, when can we get our hands on them? And all we can say is very soon, I think. However, yes. So, yes.
Bass drum, please.
Bass drum. The bass drum, okay. Which the legend is kind of based on. Okay, big difference here with the original one is that we do actually have tuning. So, and also, I think the decay
might be a bit longer.
A bit longer. I think that with the boutique, that was a switchable thing in software. But I think these feel a bit longer. But also tuning-wise, see tone.
We get that. And yeah, look, I mean, you can see a frequency. There is a massive fundamental there. And yes, it does shake the room. You know, it does. We don't have an original 808 to compare it against, but it sounds pretty massive to us.
So that's the range of tuning.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So
snare drum.
Snare drum.
It's like a sound check.
Yeah, I'll put them all to 12 o'clock. Okay, so tone. The tone. And then the snappy, which I guess is always like the snares really at the bottom of the, you know, the springs on the bottom of the snare, isn't it?
Yeah.
So if we take them both out.
That sounds pretty. Remember, there's maybe something slightly different about that. You used to have an 808, so maybe
it sounds. It's quite satisfying. I think it's quite satisfying. Let's see. I've got these set on toms here. Again, these switches exactly as you'd expect.
Bibble bobble. We don't need to go through, but you can tune them all. That's all fine.
Yep.
Rim shot, quite an important one.
And
let's have that rim shot again.
Rim shot.
Yeah, that's got the thing going on, hasn't it? And then we've got a clave as well.
Yeah. Oh yes, clave. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the classic hand clap. Now this has gained a new control as well, called offset. Now it sounds a little bit like a reverb. If we turn it to the left, it's like it increases the reverb.
Yeah. It changes the transient, the attack transient part, and turns up the...
all the way over there. Obviously, you lose a bit of gain when it goes there too.
The other thing that we should say about the clap, and this is what happened in the original, which I didn't know. The clap circuitry sort of has to charge up. So when you change patterns or you switch the thing on and you have a clap, it doesn't trigger for the first couple of beats. It's got to sort of like charge up the voltage and then it works. And apparently that was the same for the original. I can't confirm that, but I kind of quite like that.
Yeah. And of course the maracas. Ooh, no, the maracas.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then cowbell.
That's just...
Which is...
Sounds about right.
Which, you know, that cowbell is so distinctive. It's almost a bit of a cliche to use it in a way.
Just use it as a trigger out perhaps in the future.
We'll get to that. Cymbal. Decay. And again, tone.
That sounds pretty close. It sounds, if anything, maybe a little less complex. It's very hard to tell. But
it's hard to tell. That's got a nice kind of sizzle to it.
And the tone, if we turn it up a bit, it's just... So,
loses some attack, doesn't it, when you take the tone down?
Yeah, it's just, I don't know what that does. I mean, we should also reiterate that these are analog circuits. This isn't a digital thing. I mean, I guess the drum machine part is digital, and you know, some of that. But basically, this is analog.
Yeah. When we get to the hats, though, there is tone controls which weren't on the original. So let's have a listen. So I would open hats.
So that's almost like a high-pass filter, it sounds like, on the open. Are they mutually exclusive, so you get that... It's hard because we can't trigger...
Yeah, and I mean, that does lead to one thing, that you have the single trigger button, and... it
would be nice if those...
Yeah, you could actually play it then, off the select button.
But they do respond to MIDI.
They do.
And they kick out MIDI as well. Just note and clock, though. There's nothing else going on.
And there's no velocity circuit in here, so it is all just at one level. But you do have the accent control like the original. But yeah, the closed hat then also gains a tone control. It's definitely got sort of... It's pretty subtle, but... Yeah. Well, I say subtle, but I mean...
It does something.
It does something.
It does something that the other one didn't.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool.
Yeah.
Beneath here, mute and solo, which obviously great.
That's sort of modern drum machine stuff.
What we'd expect. And, well, there is a bunch of things, actually, when we start to explore that does...
We got some patterns, haven't we? Let's just play a couple of patterns. Oh.
Guess the pattern.
So I'm just messing with the bass drum here.
Change pattern.
And you notice that the tempo is being recalled with each pattern as well.
Yeah.
We should probably talk about the memory a little bit. Oh, here we go. We know what that one is.
So tempo, 94. And here's a cool thing, though, is that you can choose to store things like tempo. Well, in fact, pretty much all the parameters that are adjustable. You can either have them set to global or set to song or set to pattern. Right. So in this case, I've changed it from the tempo being like a global to being stored on a per pattern basis. And
maybe we should talk about the memory structure. Before we do, we should have just perhaps a quick word about build quality. It feels okay. I mean, it's not as robust as perhaps the original 808, but that was a bit more like a tank. But I don't have any kind of, I can't think of any real issues with it. I mean, it seems okay. I mean, bearing in mind it's you know, $300 or 300 quid. So you're not getting mil spec. You're getting what you'd expect. And these, it's nice to see these little things.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right, though, in that build quality is about as good as I think it needs to be at, and certainly for the price point. I mean, and we mentioned the price here, like £300 or thereabouts is.
And also, it's worth mentioning that all the outputs are on 1/4-inch jacks rather than 8s. We've got MIDI in, out and through, and then there's a USB connection. USB connection is only for MIDI data. It doesn't do audio. I mean, wouldn't it be awesome if it did audio as well, and then you'd have the best of both worlds? But that would be pretty, but it doesn't. Never mind.
Okay, so we can so pattern-wise then, we can see the tempos changing here. There's a lot of information that you can actually store in a pattern other than just simply the triggers. Example being, you can store some of the features. Now we will look in the effects in a moment, but you can store effects data, you can store sort of note repeat data and various things.
Oh yeah, we were going to say there are 16 songs.
Oh yes.
In memory. Each song has up to 16 patterns.
Yes.
And each pattern can be up to 64
64.
steps, which is a big change
Yeah.
over the original, right? I mean, it's actually quite a big difference.
Yeah.
So that already makes it kind of a lot more powerful, and also you
Yeah.
can set different lengths, so you can get, and it's got swing.
Swing, yes, absolutely. Swing controls, and then, you know, and also probability. Now we'll look at probability in a moment. But like when you mentioned there about 64 steps, one of the things, that little toggle switch on the 808 would go between an A and a B or an A plus B. Well, this kind of gets around that.
We've got that, the Marvin Gaye pattern, the sexual healing pattern. We could check that out.
Oh yeah, yeah, okay. So if we go into steps here, we can see these little lights go in. Look, we're playing the second bar there, flicking back. And we can also turn on, handily, we can turn on auto scroll. So we can see the pattern will change as it goes around. Yeah?
Yeah.
Which, again,
you know, it's modern stuff.
Modern stuff.
But on an old-fashioned drum machine.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we should mention is obviously the guys in Manchester. You've probably seen a couple of the team if you've watched any of the Super Booth. Dave and who's the other guy?
Well, it's Rob Belcher.
Yeah, they've been really kind of. They've wanted to sort of take the programming interface a little bit further. So kind of, hence our sort of thought that it's more like a Mark II than a faithful replication.
Yeah, and I think that is a kind of key thing, because when you actually do use this, those updates to the workflow are really, really welcome, I have to be honest, because the original is quite clunky. You know, you have to always select which drum that you're choosing by turning this knob,
is a lot easier.
Whereas you can just, you know, jump to them super fast.
One thing maybe we should do the effects bit next, because that will give us some more sound examples, because the effects are quite interesting.
Yes, they are.
There's a wave designer, which is like a transient shaper. This again is analog.
Yeah.
And then there's also a multi-mode filter, high and low pass filter, resonant filter.
Something that needs to be clarified there, though, is that any sound that goes into the filter has to go through the wave designer.
Right.
So that is
it's like a bussing
it's
system.
Like a bus, yeah. So the way we do that was we'd turn on. Let's get a pattern. Well,
shall we have something?
Let's get
kicking?
Yeah, let's get this fill.
No, let's have something a little, just
more,
a little less. That's it. Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
So we can.
Right. So yeah. So when you press the send button, we can see all of our voices flashing. As soon as they become solid. In the case of the
kick.
Now
it's in here, right? So
yeah, 12 o'clock on those, fully open filter. Oh, the filter's off at the moment. Yeah, do the wave designer first.
Okay, so we'll do that. So we go to solo, and then that's probably the.
I need to come out of that first. Solo.
And then we go to send mode. So now, is it still going back in? There we go. So it's in. So we can let.
So sustain.
So we're adding all this sort of sustain.
Yeah. So that's how you get those really big, long.
Yeah. So it's almost, you know, it's like a kind of envelope shaper, compressor type of thing. So then if we. So you hear what's going on there, right? Let's put some more stuff into it. Let's put the snare in it.
Yeah.
And we need to come out of solo.
Yeah.
Let's maybe come out of solo mode and we can start to.
So you do have to. Yeah. Any mode you're in, you have to come out of the mode and go back in another mode, which is a little bit awkward, I think.
So let's just come out. Should we just come out of solo completely?
Yeah. Oh, come out of solo completely. Yeah. Okay. So we'll go to send. Out of solo, into send, into send.
So we can take that again. We take the clap out, so you can hear what it's doing. So if we let's just put everything in it and see what it does. There we go. So we get almost like pumping and kind of flutter. Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
So you can really start to
Oh, that's giving it the thing then.
It's starting to suck and pump.
Suck and pump.
So you know, I must admit I hadn't got it sounding this extreme before. So you can really tame it down or just make it all. So there's quite a lot you can do with this. Yeah,
so of course, if you're working in a DAW and you're running this out, you know, you could just solo out each of your parts. You know, say you've only got like a 2-in input or something. Yeah. So and then shape every sound as it goes down.
Yeah, you could do that. I mean, it obviously interacts with one another. And the other thing you're probably thinking, ooh, this, it's very performance orientated. Wouldn't it be great if these all responded and sent MIDI CC? I'm afraid that's not actually the case, which is a real shame, but analog is analog, I guess, and that's that.
Okay, so we talked about how the wave designer, how the signal goes into the wave designer and then hits a filter. This is a multimode filter in that it's toggleable between a low pass and a high pass. Shall we have a listen to that filter?
Yeah. So let's go back to
12 o'clock.
And we go into high pass mode. And you can pick out those low harmonics as well if you want.
Yeah.
Ooh. And the thing that's interesting about these is this parameter here, the cutoff, is actually recordable, right?
Recordable into a pattern. So, should we do that?
Yeah.
Let's do that on that fill. Let's do it on that
we'll
fill.
do it on the fill.
Yeah, okay.
So now we're going into another mode. So we've got another pattern, which was...
So change this pattern.
That one, I think it was.
Oh, I think I put it on there.
Ah, that's the fill.
Oh, sorry.
So we got this kind of... So,
okay.
So we can... So now what I do, let's just record that. So I'm going to go... I didn't do it properly.
Oh, sorry, we need to be in step.
All right, okay, here we go. Yeah, this is with sort of identifying that there are a few. So, right, record.
Yeah.
So,
two-bar pattern.
Recorded a little bit of filter movement. I mean, it's not, it's not like parameter P-lock or anything like that, but it's...
Hey, well, you mentioned P-lock, sort of as in parameter locking. This kind of does do it, you see. So if we go into the settings now, the settings button, above each of these switches are a load of sort of like...
Parameters,
right? Yeah. So like if I go settings and go to filter, now, interestingly, as I go through all the steps...
Oh, that's the frequency that I was dialing in.
Yeah.
And you can edit that, presumably.
And you can edit that with the thing. So, like, like say these first few steps, let's, look, I'll just dial it. I'll dial it right out. Or dial it right down, as an example. Let's just see how that works. Around here, go.
All right, okay, so you can get quite granular, but...
Yeah.
I mean, it's, yeah.
And
okay.
that only records the cutoff.
That's the only thing that...
Yeah, so it
won't
record
the only
the
thing
resonance.
that actually...
Oh.
And that
but it will store the filter state, whether it's on or off, in a per pattern basis. Yeah.
All right, gotcha.
Yeah.
So the other thing that, I mean, obviously the 808 is famous for so many tracks and so many kind of sounds, and quite often it's been something that, like we say, is heavily processed. But this has also got some other programming chops. Yeah?
It absolutely has. We've got this whole section here, this note repeat section, and we've also got like kind of randomization facilities and probability too.
Right, okay.
So the probability is quite interesting because, like, if we take a pattern like this, now with this data mode, I can step between tempo, swing, probability, and flam. So if I go to probability, at the moment there's a setting of 26. So if I increase that, I put loads and loads of steps in. So if I go all the way up,
that's what you
programmed loads of steps.
But if you turn it down, you get some. But we didn't apply it to every single voice, did we?
No.
You can go into individual.
Yeah.
Perhaps we won't go into, but one thing I will say, that's a trick that Cenk, aka Dataline, did with Electron stuff, where you just turn everything on all the time and then dial in the probability, and you get this sort of random...
Well, what we've done here, though, in the settings, probability, we've gone to different, when we're in the probability mode, I've gone to bass drum, I've said, look, I've turned off the probability mode, affecting beats 1, 5, 9, and...
So they'll always sound.
So
you can create some complex patterns that shift and whatnot. There it goes.
So it becomes like a kind of performable, like an extension to the performability. Now, also, where I've got the settings, I can go tap and go back to my pattern here, and it will revert back
to the probability.
To the stored settings.
Okay. Because when you've got a song open and you tweak any of the parameters.
Yes. Auto save.
It auto saves.
Yes. Not auto.
It stays in the edit buffer
it stays
until
in the
you change. If you change songs, you'd lose everything. But you then have to save it You save the song or the individual patterns or
patterns within a song.
Right.
So within a single song, you could create a bunch of patterns without pressing save once. You know,
and then it'd be gone.
If
you record a new song.
Change the song. But so that's actually really cool because like things like the Beat Step Pro, for instance, you create a pattern. If you change to another pattern, it's gone. You have to keep saving. So you don't on this.
But it's got a bigger edit buffer.
Yeah.
That's essentially how it works.
And then that feature then of being able, you can like mess with your pattern you could save a pattern, mess around with it until it's nothing like it, press and hold that and hit the pattern.
Come straight back.
And it'll jump
so
back.
You could use it for jamming or live or whatever.
That's kind of very much like an Electron kind of thing.
Yeah, I guess so.
So that's pretty cool.
What's next on the list, Gaz?
Well, we talked about probability, and yes, so where we talked about that on, the probability on the kick, that is effective. You can do that on every track.
Right.
So that level of granularity extends across to some more features, including the kind of poly mode. So now poly mode is polymetric.
Polymetric. Yeah, we've been schooled. Actually, it's not polyrhythm, it's polymetric. And we've got that now. People have said we've learned our lesson.
We've listened. Okay. So a pattern like this, for instance, now.
Simple
little pattern. Now, I'll go into the poly mode, settings, poly. Now I'll choose, let's take the that little kind of clave pattern here. Okay, all the lights are flashing.
So we make it rim shot, then it's hit. We can hear it better. We can hear it better.
Good point.
So you're gonna make that now.
Well, I have to make sure that I turn poly mode on first, actually. So, right. Okay, so poly mode is on now.
And you've got, so that's 13 step length.
Yeah. So let's change the clap to 15, for instance. That took the clap needed a bit of a warm up,
didn't it?
Yeah. Let's change the snare.
So yeah, if you want to do that kind of crazy stuff, which I wonder whether there are probably.
I think it's great. I like all of that. Set the hat. Anyway, but I mean, yeah, on the fly.
So you can do it.
Yeah, and again, it's that thing that every single track has its own kind of.
So does that? So the one thing that we should say when you're in polyrhythm mode, it affects the way it works with the overall pattern length. Does it reduce it to 16 steps, or can we still get 32 and 64s?
You would just basically when you're in that poly mode, if you were doing a 64-step pattern, you just have to make sure you navigate to 64 and you'd set.
Ah, okay. All right. So wow, so you could have a 64 and a 63.
You could have, 64, 63, whatever you want. And as I mentioned earlier, when we were listening to the different patterns playing back on their own tempos, it means that when you're programming a song, it means that every pattern can be its own tempo, its own time signature, and within its own time signature, lots of different polymetric patterns. So in terms of the complexity.
So essentially, this is now. I mean, when we consider when the original came out, it was right in the pot. There was lots of prog going on. So now this has actually just been updated so that it could be applicable to music of the time when it was initially released.
Well, yes. So you could create the most ludicrous patterns.
Actually, one thing we should check as well. Have we got a straight pattern? We can just dial in some swing so we can listen to the.
Good thinking, because
people are going to want to hear that.
No swing in the original 808.
Yeah, so
people often talk about the swing of an 808, and it's
right. So we got.
Okay. So with data mode, we'd navigate to swing and see 50% sort of like as in zero swing,
So yeah, there it goes. We go too far.
We can go only 75.
Can we go below 50?
No. So
sometimes you go the other way.
Yeah, just and.
As with motors,
than
usually
not.
56, 55 to 57 is enough.
Just for a
give
little
it that little bit of stuff.
Yeah. But there is this peculiar thing about the 808, though. Even when it's like dead straight, there is something.
It's got a bit of a groove to it.
Somehow it does.
I think it maybe is down to the voicing and the fact that it's analog and it's not the same every time, and the ear just somehow is tuned to.
You don't think we've been hypnotised by years and we've been sort of conditioned by years and years of dance music where this has been so dominant, though, that it's like those sounds we just naturally.
Yeah, maybe it's like distorted guitars, isn't it? And tape saturation.
Head banging with distorted guitars. Yeah, it's like the 808 boogie. So. We talked about probability, randomness. Well, we won't go into all of this because there's a lot you can go into. But like randomness is, you can create random patterns and then you can control how much randomness you want. And
note repeats probably an interesting one. Yeah,
yes.
let's have a look at that.
Now, this whole section here. Right, so this kind of works in two ways. It either works as, either and, rather. So you can, like this, so if we play that pattern, and then if I choose step repeat, it'll just keep repeating
chunks of that.
But it will remain.
So yeah, that's like that. Yeah. Right. Okay.
That's the step repeat.
Right.
Note repeat, on the other hand, is just individual. So whichever voice you've got selected.
Right. Hey, drill. we can start to take on the drill next door. Yeah.
So now these.
Can we program in per step? So that
we can, yeah. But before we do that though, in case you're wondering, this will respond to swing. Listen.
Okay.
Which is cool, because quite often those kind of things don't.
Right.
Yes, but you said about programming, you don't program in the step repeat, but you can program in note repeat. So what we'll do is here is, again, with our settings button, I'm going to hit repeat. Okay, now I'm going to choose, let's have a listen to the band. Okay, I'll take the hand clap for instance. So the claps are on 5 and on, so if now I'm going to turn note repeat on for this step.
Right.
Or, so, and I know this one here.
Right, okay. Oh, we can, yeah, okay.
Oh God, sorry, go on.
We might be able to hear it.
Maybe
the snare.
Maybe the snare might be easier.
But I get your point. So you could program up layers and multiples of that,
yes.
And that's the sort of thing that you could do on the fly, and then recall your pattern.
And save that in a per pattern basis, you know. And the kind of cool thing there is that again, it's applicable to you know, you can put that on every single voice. You're not limited to how many of them you can use. And actually, that does actually remind me. One of the things that on the original 808, the graphics, those distinctive lines which kind of show the scale length.
Yeah.
You know,
you don't need that.
You don't need that on here, but when you hit settings, there they are.
Ah, so you got
So you can change the scale length. So basically, you know, how long each set, triplet patterns, yeah, that sort of thing. So you can do that, just in case you're wondering. Okay, so well.
God, we've been flying through this, haven't we?
There's so much on here.
I think we should also return back to the sound a little bit because. You know, from what we've been hearing, and we have the speakers in here have quite an extended low end, and it's definitely there. You know, you're getting that stuff. I mean, obviously a little bit extra processing, whether you maybe use the Wave Dynamic Designer or taking the separate outs and doing your magic, you know, that you like to do. It's doable. It's got that. I mean, you've seen the frequency response. It goes down, and it's got a great big fundamental.
And to my ears, I mean, it sounds certainly close enough to be really useful. I mean, I think if you want to get into brass tacks, you know, actual.
Well, 808s don't always sound the same between themselves.
Well, yeah.
The only thing I would like to have seen is storage of levels. That would have been, you know, at the minimum, because then you could bring a kit back and it would be ready exactly, you know, with all the levels set. That would have been nice, you know. But I guess
this is the trade-off for the.
This is not digitally controlled. This is all analog stuff.
Yeah,
so.
And I mean, you know, so. I would say if you want accuracy, I would get the TR-08 because although it's still digital, the whole thing is based on it being like a kind of accurate thing. This, though, I think goes into a new territory, you know, and I think it's healthier to kind of think of this as like inspired by the 808 as opposed to being. Like an 8, you know, being an 808.
Maybe you know. I mean, you might notice there's this great issue here. I'm just going to reveal this because we were going to play with the triggers because not only have we got individual outs here, but we've got 3 sets of triggers out, and there's also clock in and out, and it does work also. And the triggers enable you to be able to basically program a part in. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but you know, Trevor Horn legendarily started his career with an 808 and a Mini Moog and a Simmons, and he was able to trigger. He used the drum signature in the 808 to trigger other sounds, and that works
Yeah.
Again, you know, it works. So we got the trigger out here. I'm just going to plug that into the gate input.
On the TR-08, you only had one trigger output, so having the 3 trigger outputs makes it a lot
and they
more
correspond.
versatile.
One is the cowbell.
One cowbell.
2 is the hand clap. And 3 corresponds to the accent.
That's right. Yes. So let's get a little pattern up.
Okay. So to demonstrate this, our kind of Trevor Horn tribute, what we've got here is there's two things going on, right?
So we've got the trigger out then feeding into the Radical Technologies Delta SEP-A.
Yep.
And now the other thing which is super cool is having all these independent outputs is really useful if you've got something to plug it into. But thankfully they've included a return on here. So what it allows you to do is it allows you just to put in a stomp box or any effect within and then return it back to the mix. And remember, the 808 is strictly a mono output. So this, I mean, we're using a reverb here, but we're just using it in mono, a Ventris reverb. And we've got that coming out of the clave output there. So, so the combination of this and this is just like a little kind of, this is the sort of thing that you might want to do, the fact that you can interface it.
Yeah, if we start with it off, and also what we're using the trigger output, which is the cowbell. So if we play the pattern and maybe turn up the cowbell, so we're using that
pattern,
and then we're gonna, what we've added there is some
reverb on the clave.
Right, and then what I'm doing here is
and I'm also going to use a little function of the RD-8 where
I'm off.
He's off. I'm going to use a function. Look, if I put in steps, but I'm not in record, this is quite cool. Look, I put in
just a little bit of cymbal.
But without it being in record, you put them in and they've gone on the next sweep. Look.
So you can program on the fly.
Yeah.
So this is actually a tribute to one of Trevor Horn's very early tracks, which you probably don't know about. There may be there is a clue on the back panel. Quick, hide everybody. So you can go and look that up. But essentially, so what we're doing is we're just able to have a trigger out, and we've got up to 3 triggers, so we could be triggering all kinds of analog equipment or modular envelopes or whatever it may be.
I like this feature. We're getting nasty now, are we?
Anyway, we could go on. This isn't really good. So the point is we were just trying to demonstrate that, have a bit of fun with that. And this also, so it allows you to do those kind of legacy things that you could do with the original 808 and some, because you've got 3 trigger outputs.
Right.
I mean, this isn't really a review. It's more of a kind of a first look at it, because like we say, it's not totally finished.
Yeah.
But you've had more time with it than I have. I mean, what are your kind of thoughts, do you think?
I kind of love it. I think it's great. I do think, however, the elephant in the room in many ways is just how big it is.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you've only got limited space, you might actually find the boutique as format-wise a bit more.
You can't win everything. You can't win. You make a boutique that's compact and people moan. You make one that's the right size and people moan.
But if you
about
look
that.
at all of that connectivity, how you can't really make that fit into a smaller smaller form factor. And I have to say, I personally love the big form factor. It feels like when you're sat behind it, especially when you've got a really nice.
You're in control.
Yeah, it's great. And the fact that they've included all of the extra performable aspects to it as well makes it a real instrument. I really feel it's a kind of, and I think we've kind of, like the 808 is so ubiquitous now as an instrument. I think it's sort of like an electric guitar or something. It's, so this is just something that makes that 808 sort of thing, but puts a new twist on it, brings in some modern features, and I think it's a bit of a winner.
I suppose the other elephant in the room is, golly, it really is. It looks like a Roland device. There is an element of that, and that whole controversial aspect, I think we probably won't get into. That's going to be for the market to decide. But I will say, every time we've put something up about this, it's gone crazy. People are really interested in it.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming because they kind of like to own it and are interested in having it. Because let's not forget, an original 808 would cost you a couple of $1,000.
It's about 3,000. I think.
3,000. I mean, they're going up and up and up.
Yeah.
So, it gives you an option.
And the extra bits, I keep going on about it, but the extra bits add real value to it, real musical value to it too. And I mean, just like little things like the sync, which looks like to me that's borrowed straight off the BeatStep Pro.
Right.
But being able to see without having to delve into any of the menu things where the sync is coming from is really cool. That big auto scroll button there, that sort of design stuff I think is really cool because, again, when you're using it, you want to get a lot of visual feedback, and some of the programming is a little bit odd. You're definitely going to need to have the manual at hand.
Yeah, but I feel that way about the original 808. When I'm put in front of it, I just kind of think, I really don't know what I'm doing. But I'm not a step programming kind of guy. And again, you can trigger this from MIDI if you want, and it will output MIDI. In fact, we were doing something earlier because we dumped some patches from a previous version of this into here. We kept pressing play on this. We're going, this is weird, and we were adjusting the sound. It's like, oh yeah, because it's just playing the notes into this. Right. So the voices were coming from here, the patterns were coming from another one. So you can use it in a number of different ways.
Yeah, and again, build quality is great for the price point. The feel of it, the sound of it, most importantly, the sound of it.
I think the sound is pretty fine.
Yeah, it's pretty fine. And it makes me want to dance.
Okay, well, that's it for this time. Thank you very much for watching. I know it's been quite long, but there's a lot to get through, and I know you probably want to know the answer to all those things. We'll see you next time.
Yeah.